les amis, et merci de...
Dear friends, good afternoon. Please take seats rapidly. Christian de Boisseux, Vice President of the Cercle des économistes, and I have with me Cheikh Conté, State Minister of the Republic of Senegal. Christine Lagarde needs no introduction. Thank you, Christine, for being with us. And mainly, I would say we are directly connected with President Macky Sall from Senegal. Dear President, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for being with us. Good afternoon to Catherine Lagarde and to... I know you're a friend of the Cercle des économistes because you came here several times, and your presence is most important for us, even when in this video conference. I'd like to thank Dr. Cheikh Conté for organizing this session. Thank you to Christine Lagarde for being with us. So before asking you the first question, I'd like to express a personal feeling, but shared by most of you, I do believe. I want to tell President Cheikh Conté how we are in admiration before the elegance of his act and his democratic dimension. You will understood what I'm mentioning. I won't go any further, but I don't have to go into the internal policy of thank you on behalf of everything you do. So I'll start. I'll ask the first question with the agreement of Christine. I put the first question to President Macky Sall. Senegal and you, President of Senegal, you shared the African Union for 1 year until February 2023. I have to push you a bit. I'm so sorry. Session is major, but a bit short. Just in a couple of words, what main lessons did you draw from your presidency of the African Union? Thank you. Once more, salutation, greetings to the audience and the participants. I'm very happy to be able to answer your question. During the presidency of the African Union, of course, we had major challenges and global challenges. There was the COVID-19. We also had the impact of the Ukraine invasion, major war, which caused a rupture of supply chains, and of course an increase of agricultural goods, and especially when it comes to fertilizers, especially, but the availability of wheat, which was a major cereal because of the stringency and the autonomy of pharmaceutical sovereignty, because the COVID has shown that the vulnerability of the continent. We had to work together on all the topics, and on the concerning governance, economic governance, global governance, and the reform of the Security Council, the Bretton Woods institutions to ensure international cooperation and collaboration that would be fair and in compliance with the situation of the world. And of course, the Paris conference last week, or the last 2 weeks, has shown that there are risks of fragmentation if the necessary reforms are not made for global governance. The other point, key point of this presidency was the battle for proper energy transition, just energy transition. More than half of the African population does not have access to electricity. And in such condition, if we want to conduct the battle on climate, there must be fairness and climate justice. And this was one of the main topics, in addition to the constant topic against the fight against terrorism. And of course, And I would like to thank all the members of the G20 for having accepted Africa as a member. I'll come back to this point, President, and especially in the discussion with Christine. You talked about the Paris Conference on the financial agreement, New World Agreement, which you attended. And did you leave Paris happy or not happy or unhappy after the conference? Well, I left Paris happy. Progress has been achieved. Of course, progress are not up to our expectations, but progress has been made, slow but certain. So now we got to speed up the movement. Today, if we can implement a device that will make it possible to review the history of drawing rights, special drawing rights, maybe there will be a balance, especially now the Africans can have access to capital markets, and the unfairness of say that developing countries, not just Africa, but when it comes to scoring system, you know, increase the credit rates would make it possible to mobilize more resources and to better develop the continent more rapidly. And this would be a blessing for all the developed countries because it's a huge market, 1.4 billion inhabitants, and 300 million middle class could buy with a purchasing power, but mainly it is also all the opportunities for the construction of a territory of more than 30 million square kilometers. So simply we have to review the condition for access to funding, and Paris has shown the way, and we'll have to follow with all the countries the implementation process. Anyway, I'm happy with what happened in Paris. Lastly, thank you, President. Christine, I could see you during the Paris conference. I saw you on TV. You were there. So, were you happy, unhappy after the conference? One of the main advantages of the Paris advantage was first to, at last, finalize the agreement on the financing of $100 billion for developing countries to help them in their climate transition. It was a 7-year-old promise. It never achieved. It was finalized thanks to the contribution of some advanced economies. The second advance was the conclusion of the restriction of the debt of Zambia, which was a huge site, been on for years, and thanks to the presence of Chinese Prime Minister and under the dynamics of the French Treasury to solve the problem of the Zambian debt. It's not the last one in this domain, but clearly I hope it was it will be a jurisprudence for what remains to be done, and all the aspects of President Macky Sall. President, great to see you. I don't have any Fable de La Fontaine for you now, but I'm sure we'll meet again. So, you talked about governance, the role of Africa in governance. And let me remind you that today there is only one African country, member of G20, in South Africa. So, of course, Africans like Europeans are represented by the General Director of the IMF and the President of the World Bank. But, you know, in terms of countries, there's only one African country member of G20, which seems to be a bit short. So, do you think that these aspects on the rebalancing of global governance, on the reform of the financial system, which were at Paris agenda, the Paris conference, are there any concrete progress, and what should be done to get concrete progress?
Yes, there have been progresses. The members of the G20 gave their agreement for Africa to obtain this permanent seat, and amongst the bilateral agreements, each country had to write and to give its support. So I believe that at the next summit, we will really have our permanent seat in the G20 group. Then it will be up to Africa to see how it can make the most of this seat, because being a member of the G20 means working throughout the year on the various topics, on the various orientations of WTO, of the IMF, on the financial topics. In fact, I would like to pay tribute to what was done at the Paris Summit on energy transition. Senegal has said that by 2040 it will have 40% of its energy that is renewable, and we will be have a support of $5 billion to support this energy transition. So for G20, I believe that our plea was heard. Africa was sort of number 8 in terms of GDP. So accepting our continent as that of the African Union was a just decision and a fair decision, and I would like to pay tribute to the countries, members of the G20, who accepted this, and now it's up to us to look at the reform of the Security Council, at the management of the energy transition together with our partners. Thank you. Christine, let me turn back to you as the former head of IMF. The hypothesis of having an African person at the head of IMF, is it a short-term possibility? I'm a former general manager of a general director of IMF, and it will be up to the member countries of this international institution to decide that. The sure thing is that African countries have 2 seats in the IMF, 3 in the World Bank. The third one for African countries within IMF should be contemplated very soon, because it would be a legitimate representation of a continent that is extremely important and that should benefit from support, have the right quotas, and have the right representation. Thank you. President, I turn back to you again on monetary and financial topic. Because of inflation, as you know, and there was tightening up of monetary policies in many countries, including in our countries, developed countries, with some consequences for you in the southern countries, where some equity has left your countries, and there's been a problem of a drop in the exchange rates in some of your countries. This inflation, rise in interest rates, equity movements, cash movements, is this a topic of concern for you? Yes, it is, because it's a concern for all the leaders, whether in our continent or throughout the planet, because we've had an exponential movement due to the impact of the COVID crisis. There was a lot of resources injected into the COVID crisis. There was also a rupture in the supply chain, and we didn't have a plan to buy back the country's debt. So at the same time, the financial markets were more or less closed, so to say, because in 2020, 2021, 2 and 3, only 3 countries had access to these countries: Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Benin. And the interest rates on these markets was over 10%. So we ended up with the local currency on the internal market, and the central bank increased in its main rates. And there was an impact on inflation, an impact because we lost some of our reserves. So the reallocation of the rights of the monetary rights has to be viewed, because otherwise our countries are going to end up with high difficulties. We have problems of cash and treasury in our countries, and things have to be done very actively. Thank you, President. Christine, let me continue being somewhat provocative. When you are the head of the ECB, can you take into account the global impact of your decisions? Answer, yes, absolutely. It's something that all central banks do. They all have a mandate, all have a mission, all have a territory to cover. And if you take into account the impact of your decision in other parts of the world, you also have to deliver according to your mandate. And to come back to what President Macky Sall was saying, the allocation of special drawing rights, especially with the two funds mobilized in 2022-2023, was a major progress for the support to developing countries. And some additional special drawing rights were decided. So each country, in as much as they're able to do it, should continue with this allocation for the countries that are in need. President, when we talk about this allocation of 100 billion, and as Christine is saying, this has to become practically to enter into force. Jean-Hervé is in this room. We've been lucky enough for the past 2 years to work on a lot of financial topics. This morning, one of our colleagues was talking about the issues of rating of African countries. Some African countries are not well rated by the agencies. What message would you like to convey to us countries so-called of the North? Well, thank you. I would like to thank Christine in particular for what she just said. The two funds that were set up, the resilience funds of the monetary fund and the other fund, in order to receive the special drawing rights that were allocated, are absolutely essential. But up till now, up till last week, only 7 countries had been funded, and we need to accelerate the process. And there should be no new prerequisite for the use of these funds. But the countries that gave their special drawing rights should work with the banks to create some leverage and multiply the money by 4, because I can tell you that the needs of the developing countries are so huge that 100 billion of special drawing rights will not be enough. As for the rest, I believe that one should continue pleading with the rating agencies, because only 3 or 4 give their rating, and their rating are very impactful for our countries, because their rating will define the reaction of the market. To give you an example, if Senegal were to ask for an export credit in OECD, even though the funding brings us back to rates of about 3 or 4% over a period of 10 years, which is not very high, you have to pay an insurance premium that is going to cost you about 12%. So we stand at 13–14% of so this really hinders the development process, and it hinders the exchange and the investments between the exchanges between north and southern countries. So we have to work on that so that the northern countries understand the African companies and apply appropriate funding mechanisms. And the rating agencies should review this notion of risk for Africa, because it's in fact, what is damaging is more their perception than the actual risk, because African countries are paying their debts. There's no reason why that you should introduce such parameters, that you have to pay such a premium. Usually you have to pay upfront these 12% before even you can start working. So this is a mechanism that should change in order to increase the exchanges between North and South. Thank you, Mr. President. We have to stop now. We would like to thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. I would like to thank Christine Lagarde. I would like to thank Dr. Chekante, with whom we've been working in a trusted manner for the past 2 years. The new topic is where are the women? So I'm going to leave, but Christine is staying.